Why would you capsize? Why you capsize is if a big gust of wind comes up and you just didn't have time to do one of those three things. So you're heeling, and the wind is blowing pretty strong, and you've got the sail in pretty close, and all of a sudden this big gust of wind comes up that you weren't prepared for, and literally just pushed your boat over. You didn't have time to let go of the sheet, you didn't have time to hike out, you capsize. So that's why you would capsize going upwind. It's not usually the wind that floats you over, it's the gusts of wind, the puffs of air. So it's important to be kind of cognizant of what's going on in the water. Once you become more experienced sailors, you can actually see puffs of wind on the water. It's a much darker patch of water with a lot more ripples in it, and you can see that it's coming my way. Some people that are really experienced sailors can actually count it down, 3, 2, 1, and they know it's going to be a puff of air, and they can adjust for the heeling. I'm not that good at that yet, but some people are. So that's one reason you might, or the only reason you might capsize when going upward. But most of the time you're going to capsize going downward. And it's going to be because either you've incorrectly done your jibe, or the accidental jibe, which causes most capsizing. Incorrectly doing your jibe simply could mean you forgot to switch sides of the boat. You bared off and you switched hands and you ducked down, but you forgot you can't be on this side of the boat. Then there's too much weight over here, you can capsize. Or maybe you did the jibe correctly, but you forgot to straighten the tiller at the end and you start spinning around, you can capsize. Or maybe you just have too much weight on one side of the boat. If you have like 3 people in the boat with you and you leave them all over on the side of the boat where the boom is going to go, then the jibe happens correctly, but there's just too much weight over there, so you have to be careful of where you put the people in your boat. Those are all possible incorrectly done jibes. Those can cause a capsize. But the most common way a capsize happens is the accidental jibe. And what that is, by definition, is when a jibe happens you weren't prepared for it. And what that means is your boat is on a run, and your telltales are streaming straight ahead, and the wind is behind you, but somehow the wind shifts, and you didn't notice it. So no longer are the telltales streaming straight ahead, they're streaming away from the sail. What can happen then is the wind can just keep shifting and eventually come up behind your sail, throw your sail over to the other side, in effect jibing, and you weren't ready for it, you're still on that side of the boat, and you capsize. That's the most common way of capsizing. So what are the 2 ways of trying? It's not completely preventable, but there are a couple ways you can try to prevent accidental jibes. One is simply to always be cognizant of what your telltales are doing. I don't want you to sit there and stare at your telltales the whole time you're sailing. It won't be any fun. But especially when you're going downwind, especially when you're on a run, making sure your telltales don't come around the wrong way. It's okay if they're going straight ahead, or if they're pointing sort of toward where the sail is. But if they start pointing away from the sail, that means the wind is coming up behind the sail, and you want to head up a little bit to get back onto a run. So if you always make sure your telltales are going straight ahead on a run, you won't accidentally jibe. But the biggest and easiest way to prevent yourself from accidentally jibing, and no one teaches this except me, is don't ever be on a run. You never have to have your boat in this position. That's the position you'll be in when you accidentally jibe. Obviously your boat has to be going downwind, because eventually you have to get back from the other side of the river and get back home. But you never have to be on an absolute dead run with your telltale streaming straight ahead. You can sail back on what's called a broad reach. And yeah, you might need to jibe a couple more times, but you won't be in as much risk as you would be if you were on a run for accidental jibing. So when it's time for you to jibe intentionally, sure, then you can get yourself on a run and jibe. But when you're just sort of heading home, heading back downwind, I would head up a little bit and not be on a dead run. That'll prevent the accidental jibe. So once you have capsized, what do? So obviously the first thing to remember is to keep smiling, because it's fun. It's a water sport. You're going to get wet. It happens to everybody. I suggest that you capsize earlier in your sailing career rather than later, and you realize how no big of a deal it is. So the question on the test is, what do you do when you capsize? The only answer is stay with the boat. Don't swim to shore. Don't climb in somebody else's boat. Don't go digging for buried treasure in the Charles River. And don't try to right the boat. These Cape Cod Mercuries are just too heavy. Once they're waterlogged, you can't tip them back up. Some boats you can. If anybody has sailed like Sunfish when they were younger, they're so light you can actually stand on the centerboard and turn them back over. The lasers that we have, or the MIT boats are, again, so light that you can use your weight on the centerboard, turn them back over, they'll be full of water, but you can keep sailing. Can't do that on the Mercury, don't even try. They get full of water, can't turn them back over. So when you capsize on a Mercury, just stay with the boat. Just kind of float there with the boat. Don't climb up on top of the boat, because that can push the boat back down into the water. Just stay with the boat, and a safety line, one of these white motorboats, will come out and rescue you and bring you to shore. So then what happens? They're going to deposit you over on the shore. Don't go home. You're going to be standing there all dripping wet. People are going to be pointing at you and laughing, but that's totally fine because you can get them back when they capsize. And then the motorboat, the same motorboat, will go out and get your boat, and they'll turn it back over using their motors. In the meantime, one of the things you need to do is go to the dock house and fill out a capsize report form. They keep tabs on capsizes. So you go in and tell them you capsized, they'll give you a form. I think you just write down your boat number, maybe your membership number, and why you capsized. Was it an accidental jibe? Did something go wrong on the boat? They just have to keep track of these things. It's not at all to penalize you. It's not to kick you out of the club. They don't give you like the merits. It's just something they keep track of, so don't worry about it. Once you filled out the capsize report form, you then have to hang around and wait for the motorboat to bring your boat back in. Because you, as the skipper of the capsized boat, are responsible for overseeing the pumping out of the boat. It's actually done automatically. They have an electric pump over there where they just put a big hose in the boat and they press a button and it all pumps out the water. So there's really nothing for you to do, but you have to stay and oversee the whole thing. Maybe when the water's all done, it'll be your responsibility to take the hose out or maybe press the off button or something. But it's your responsibility to simply oversee the pumping out of the water. The only other thing you might have to do before you go home is in the scenario where the boat turtles. What that means is, there's really no rhyme or reason to why a boat might turtle. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So if this is your water, and this is your capsized boat, this is pretty much what's going to happen most of the time. It's just going to hover there, kind of halfway over, and you're going to fall out of the boat, and that's it. But sometimes the boat might turn completely upside down, and that's called turtling. And what can happen in this case is if it's in a particularly shallow part of the water, and the Charles River is actually much shallower than you might think, the top of the mast can actually hit the bottom of the river. And if it does that, it can scoop up some of the material at the bottom of the river, and it'll be stuck in the mast. And you might think that the bottom of the river is made of sand and gravel and dirt and mud. No. It's this disgusting black gook. I have no idea what it is. I can't figure it out. But it just looks like crude oil. It's just all the years of pharmaceuticals dumping into the river. I don't know what it is. But you'll know. Because when they bring your boat back in, the most black thing you ever see in your life will be dripping down from the mast and on the sails. That's when you'll know your boat is turtled. If that has happened, it's then your responsibility to clean off the boat. So what they're going to do is just give you a garden hose and a little squirty thing, and you'll just sort of squirt water onto the sail and into the crack of the mast until it comes out clean and get all the black gook off the boat. And that's only going to happen if the boat turtles. I'll give you a little tip to prevent your boat from turtling if you happen to capsize. Well, we will capsize. And you won't remember this right away, because the first time you capsize, it'll be kind of a surprise to you. The first thing you're going to remember is to keep smiling. But after you've capsized 2 or 3 times, you might just remember this little tip that Scott gave you. Oh yeah, there's a way to keep your boat from turtling. What it is this. Once you've capsized and you've slunk out of your boat into the water and you're smiling, you'll be wearing a life preserver because life preservers are required in all these boats. But in addition to the high-tech PPFs that we wear on our bodies, there's also those old-fashioned orange life preservers in each boat. There's always at least 2 or 3 of them kind of held in by bungee cords. If you can remember, after you've fallen out of the boat a few times and after you remember to smile, if you grab one of those orange life preservers and you actually swim down to the end of the mast and you put it around the top of the mast before the mast starts sinking, it'll act as a flotation device and the boat won't turtle. So that's just one way of preventing the boat from turtling. If you've cleaned off that black gook a few times, you're just kind of sick of doing that. So again, I don't expect you to remember that right away, but you might remember it by the 4th time you capsize. Just a little tip for you. Another thing that could go wrong when you're out there sailing is your boat can run aground. That means that the boat gets so close to the shore that the centerboard actually hits the rocks and you get stuck and you run aground. It can only happen on an island over here or on the Boston shore. There's no ground to run aground onto on the Cambridge shore. So it's going to happen on one of these 2 sides. And it's going to happen if you just get too close to the island or the shore. It tends to happen on a very windy day or a very non-windy day. On a very windy day, you might just sort of lose control and get too close to the shore. On a very non-windy day, you don't have a lot of control, you can drift near the shore. So one way of preventing your run aground is just don't get too close to the shore. And one of the questions on the test is, what's a safe distance to stay away from the shore and other boats? And it's 3 to 4 boat lengths. Okay? Well, what happens if you do run aground? There are 3 things that we'd like you to do in a particular order. First thing you do is remove your rudder. And the reason that's the first thing you do is it's the most delicate part of the boat. It's made out of wood, and if it starts getting bent on the rocks, it can actually break. Second thing you do is you lower your sail halfway. And that accomplishes two things. One, it takes the power out of the boat so you don't go further onto the island. And two, lowering your sail halfway is the universal symbol of community boating for help. So if you need help for any reason, you lower your sail halfway and they'll come out and help you. And that also means that if you see somebody further downriver that's either capsized or run aground, and you feel like being a good Samaritan and helping them, you can lower your sail halfway, even though there's nothing wrong with your boat. Dock staff will see that and they'll come out and help. So lowering your sail halfway just means come help me or somebody else. So once you've lowered your sail halfway when you run aground, third thing to do is raise your centerboard. And your centerboard, again, is this piece of metal that's sticking to the bottom of the boat. It's attached, it lives in this sort of plastic dome inside of your boat. And it's attached to a rope and a pulley, and you simply just pull the rope and you pull the centerboard back up in the boat. So those are the three things that you do in order when you run aground. And community boating has come up with a little slogan or phrase for you to help remember what order means and things in, and they consider running aground to be a routine sailing catastrophe. It's not a catastrophe. It's not that routine, but it's easy for you to remember RSC. Rudder, sail, centerboard. You can also use Royal Shakespeare Company if you prefer, but routine sailing catastrophe is the easy way to remember what to do when your boat runs around. Talked about healing. The American flag is on the building behind us. When the flag is up, the club is open. When the flag is down, the club is closed. But if during the day they detect any lightning out there, they immediately lower the American flag. And what that means for you to do is to come in immediately. Okay, because there's lightning out there, and it's not good to be in a boat with a big, tall piece of metal sticking out of it when there's lightning. However, in reality, when you're way out there in the river enjoying yourself, you're probably not going to be looking back at the dock house to see if the American flag is up. So what really is going to happen is they'll come out in motorboats with whistles and bullhorns, and they'll tell everybody to come back in so you'll all be safe. But the answer to the question on the test is, when the American flag is lowered, you come in immediately. If somebody falls overboard, and typically this is not going to be you, because skippers don't tend to fall overboard. If you fall overboard, I don't know what to tell you. But you probably won't fall overboard. What might happen is somebody in your crew might fall overboard, either by getting hit in the head with a boom or be too far down when the boat is heeling or whatever. Somebody could fall overboard. So what do you do when somebody falls overboard? The only thing they want you to do is stay with the person and lower your sail halfway. So don't go sailing away and wave goodbye to the person. Come back to where the person is, lower your sail halfway, and someone will come out and help you. As novice sailors, they think it's best not to try to bring the sailor, the crew member, back into the boat. Because a number of things could happen. You could capsize, you could fall out of the boat yourself, you could injure the person. When you learn more about sailing, you learn man overboard drills, and you learn how to do this